Mom told me. "You're a disgrace to this family. Don't come to my house again." I said okay, and walked out. A month later she came running when she found out that When she said it, she didn't even raise her voice. She just stood there in the doorway of her living room, arms crossed, like a judge delivering a sentence. "You're a disgrace to this family, Luke. Don't come to my house again." And for a moment I just stared. It was one of those nights that had already felt fragile. Dinner had been quiet, full of the kind of brittle politeness that makes your stomach knot up. I'd been trying for weeks to smooth things over with my mom, ever since she'd started making little comments, things like how I was falling behind, how I made them worry, how other people's sons were already settled down. But nothing prepared me for that. I thought maybe she just needed to vent, that she'd calm down, that we'd talk about it. Instead, she looked at me like I was something she wished she hadn't given birth to. There was so much I could have said back. So much I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I heard myself say one word, flat and almost quiet. "Okay." Then I grabbed my jacket, walked out of the house, and I never looked back. The door clicked behind me and the night air hit me like ice. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I wasn't coming back. That first night after I left, I didn't go anywhere special. I sat in my old beat-up car, parked 3 blocks away from her house, staring at the steering wheel like it could tell me what to do. The streetlights hummed. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. It's strange, when someone you love cuts you down like that, it doesn't feel like anger at first. It feels like a hole opening up inside you. I drove aimlessly for hours. Past the grocery store where she used to hold my hand as a kid. Past the park where she once cheered for me from the bleachers. And all I could think was, what did I do to make her see me that way? By the time I reached my apartment, it was close to midnight. I didn't turn on the lights. Just collapsed on the couch, shoes still on, and stared at the ceiling. Her words kept looping in my head, every syllable sharper the second time around. "A disgrace to this family, don't come to my house again." The silence in that apartment that night, it wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Every creak in the walls sounded like judgment. That was the first time I realized, I couldn't go on like this. If she thought I was a disgrace, fine. Then I would become something else entirely. Something she wouldn't even recognize. And that night, I made myself a quiet promise. I would disappear. I would build a life she couldn't touch. And when she looked for me, I wouldn't be there. The next morning, I woke up with that promise still in my chest like a stone. I didn't call anyone. Didn't send a text. I just got dressed and went to work like nothing had happened. It's strange, the way grief can turn into fuel if you let it. Every time her words echoed, "You're a disgrace," it was like someone lit a match in my gut. I worked through lunch. Stayed late. When I left my job at the auto shop at 6 p.m., I headed straight to the warehouse where I'd been picking up side shifts unloading pallets. By the time I dragged myself home, it was past midnight. I did the same thing the next day. And the next. At first, I thought the exhaustion might numb it all out. But instead, something else happened, the anger sharpened into focus. If she didn't think I'd ever amount to anything, I was going to shove proof in her face. On the 4th night, when I finally stopped moving long enough to breathe, I opened my laptop. I'd had an idea rattling around in my head for months, turning the detailing work I did on cars into a small side business. Before, it felt like a fantasy. Now, it felt like survival. I registered a name. Built a cheap, clunky website. That first week, I poured every cent I had into supplies. I slept 4 hours a night, balancing my day job with this new obsession. And then, weirdly, it started to work. I got my first client through a neighbor. Then another from a coworker. Word spread. People liked how meticulous I was, how I worked until the car looked like it had just left the factory. By the end of the 2nd week, I barely saw my apartment. By the end of the 3rd, I stopped checking my phone altogether. I ignored my relatives, my old friends, anyone who might run back and tell her how I was doing. I wasn't just leaving her house behind. I was leaving the version of myself who still hoped she'd call and say she didn't mean it. Every drop of hurt turned into motion. And slowly, almost without noticing, I realized I was building something that belonged entirely to me. By the start of the 4th week, something shifted. The first change came as a phone call from a stranger. He said his name was Greg, that he had seen a photo of a truck I'd detailed on social media. He asked if I could do the same for his small fleet of delivery vans. I remember standing there in my greasy overalls, holding the phone to my ear, trying to sound calm while my heart was thudding. "Sure," I said. "When do you need them?" That one job paid more than my regular paycheck. And when I finished, Greg handed me a tip and told me he'd already given my number to 3 other business owners. Within days, my phone was ringing constantly. It was chaos. Good chaos. Every spare moment was spent hunched over engines and interiors, scrubbing away months of dirt and neglect. I barely slept. I ate whatever I could grab on the way. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel stuck. By the end of that month, I had more money than I'd ever had sitting in my bank account. I sat there staring at the number, laughing quietly in my dim apartment. The first thing I did was find a realtor. The second was tell my boss at the shop I was quitting. 2 weeks later, I signed the papers on a small house, nothing fancy, but new, clean, mine. I bought it outright. When I walked into that place for the first time, with the keys cold in my hand, it felt like I'd stepped into someone else's life. I bought good tools, a decent coffee maker, a table that didn't wobble when I leaned on it. The walls were still bare, the room still quiet, but it wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. In that whole month, I didn't hear a word from her. Not one text. Not one call. It was like I'd fallen off the edge of her world. I thought I was ready to keep it that way. But word has a way of traveling in families. And mine had just started to travel. It was a Thursday evening when the silence cracked. I had just finished detailing the last car of the day and was sitting on the steps of my new porch, watching the sun slide down behind the houses. My phone buzzed. The caller ID made me pause. Uncle Frank. We hadn't spoken in years. I answered, half wary. "Luke." His voice boomed like he'd been looking for me all month. "Son, I just heard what you've been up to." I blinked. "Heard what?" "Oh, don't play dumb," he said. "Greg came over bragging about those vans you fixed up. And your cousin Lisa saw a picture of your new house on Facebook. Everyone's talking about it. You really turned things around." I could hear the pride in his voice, but all I felt was a quiet dread. Because I knew exactly what was coming next. Sure enough, 2 hours later, my phone rang again. This time, it was her. "Mom." I let it ring. Once. Twice. 6 times. No voicemail. Then a text came through. Short, strange. "We need to talk. Please." I stared at those words for a long time. The next day, the calls started coming like a flood. Aunts. Cousins. Even my little brother, who hadn't said 2 words to me in a year. Every one of them opening with the same phrase. "She just found out." Apparently, the story of my little business had become family gossip. Someone had shown her a photo of my house. They told her how quickly it had all happened, how Luke's finally doing well for himself. And for a week, I said nothing. I worked. I ignored every call. But on the 8th day, just as the sun was setting again, there was a knock at my door. I opened it, and there she was. Her eyes were red, cheeks wet, hands shaking. The same woman who told me I was a disgrace to her family was standing on my doorstep, crying. And for the first time in my life, I felt absolutely nothing. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, one hand clutching the strap of her purse like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Luke," she whispered finally. Her voice was small, a sound I didn't recognize. I stepped aside without a word. Not because I wanted her in, but because I wanted her to see it. The house wasn't big, but it was spotless. Polished hardwood floors, clean white walls, sunlight spilling across a table I'd built myself. It was the kind of calm she'd always told me I wasn't capable of creating. She walked in slow, looking around like she couldn't believe it belonged to me. Her fingers brushed the back of a chair, the edge of the counter. Is this all yours? I nodded. Everything in me wanted to cross my arms and ask if she remembered her words, but I stayed quiet. I wanted her to speak first. And she did. I've been hearing about you, she said, her voice trembling. Your uncle called, your cousin too. Luke, I didn't know you were doing all of this. I didn't know. Her breath caught. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I sat down at the table, letting her stand. Were you? I asked calm. She nodded quickly, like a child caught stealing. I was angry that night. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to say those things. You're not a disgrace. I don't even know why I said that. There were tears on her cheeks now. I let her talk. You've always been good, Luke. You always helped, even when you didn't have to. And I'd push you away. I thought I was helping you by being strict, by forcing you to do better. But I went too far. Please, can we just start over? Come back home. Please. I just watched her. Every apology felt like it was sliding off a wall that had been built stone by stone, day by day, over the last month. Finally I said, Do you remember exactly what you said that night? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I repeated it for her. Slowly. You're a disgrace to this family. Don't come to my house again. The silence that followed was long and heavy. Yes, she whispered. I remember. I smiled then, not a warm smile, but the kind of cold, steady smile that comes from finally holding the higher ground. Good, I said. Because I'm just returning the favor. She blinked. What? I stood, walked to the door, and opened it wide. I built this life without you, I said, my voice even. You told me not to come to your house again. And now you don't get to come to mine. Her hands trembled. Luke, please don't do this. You don't understand how much I regret. I shook my head. No, Mom. You don't understand. You only regret it because now you can see I don't need you. She reached out, but I stepped back. This door, I said quietly, is closed. Just like you closed yours on me. And with that I shut the door. I stood there for a long time, leaning against it, listening to the sound of her sobbing on the other side. Eventually, her footsteps faded down the walkway. The house was silent again. But this time, it was peaceful. When the click of the door lock echoed through the hallway, I didn't move. I just stood there, one hand pressed to the wood, feeling it vibrate faintly as she sobbed on the other side. I thought there would be triumph. That was what I'd imagined, 100 times, on those sleepless nights when her words wouldn't leave me alone. But in that moment, there wasn't victory. There was something quieter, deeper. It was peace. The sound of her crying faded by degrees until it was just me and the stillness of the house. I didn't cry. I didn't even sit down right away. I just walked through every room, slow and deliberate, as if to remind myself that I had built this life. Every surface, every tool in the garage, every chair and picture frame, it was mine. For the first time, I wasn't standing in anyone else's shadow. The next day, the phone calls came. First from my aunt, her voice sharp. Luke, what did you say to your mother? She came home in tears. Then from my cousin, softer. You didn't have to be so harsh. She's just proud of you now, you know. I said the same thing to all of them. She told me not to come to her house again. I was just doing what she asked. That's all. Some argued, some tried to mediate, but none of them could unhear the calm in my voice. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even hurt. It was finality. In the weeks that followed, the family divided neatly into two groups, those who blamed me for shutting her out, and those who quietly admitted they'd never seen me so steady, so sure of myself. I buried myself in my work. The business kept growing, so fast, I had to hire 2 guys to keep up. Every day I walked into the garage behind my house and remembered the boy who left that night with nothing but a car and a broken heart. And every day, I left a little more of him behind. It's a strange thing, to realize how much of your life has been built around trying to earn the approval of someone who will never give it. When I finally stepped away from that, everything else fell into place. One night, about a month after I closed that door, I sat out on my porch and watched the sun sink over the roofs. The air smelled of cut grass and engine oil, the kind of scent that only happens in the summer. And I felt, truly felt, for the first time in years, that my life belonged to me. I thought of her. Of the tears on her cheeks, the way her voice cracked. And instead of pain, I felt a kind of release. Some doors, once closed, shouldn't open again. In the weeks after I closed that door, it became clear that the ripples were going to spread far wider than I had expected. The first wave came as phone calls. Then texts. Then carefully worded messages on Facebook from people who hadn't spoken to me in years. Most of them had the same tone, like they were standing on a fence, trying to choose the safest side. She was crying, "Luke. You should call her. She just didn't know how much you were doing." Or worse. "Family is family. You only get one mom." I didn't bother answering. It wasn't cruelty. It was just that after years of listening to those same people stay silent when she tore me down, their sudden concern didn't hold much weight. But there were a few who were different. My cousin Lisa, the one who had accidentally started this whole thing with that photo, sent me a text that was just 3 words long. "I get it." That was the first message that didn't make me tighten my jaw. The second surprise came in person. It was a rainy Thursday night, and I'd been in the garage detailing a deep green SUV, the kind of job that takes your whole focus. I didn't hear the car pull up. I only noticed the figure when the rain-streaked silhouette paused at the edge of the open garage door. I turned, rag in hand, and froze. It wasn't my mother. It was my little brother, Nathan. He looked older than I remembered, broader in the shoulders, but his face carried that same nervousness he'd had as a teenager whenever the house turned tense. "Hey," he said quietly. For a moment neither of us moved. Then I went back to wiping down the door panel. "You here to talk me into forgiving her?" He hesitated, stepping inside. "No. I just wanted to see you. Without everyone else talking." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" He shifted awkwardly. "And you were right to walk out that night." That made me pause. "I should have said something," he admitted. "I wanted to. But I was scared. And then after you left, the house felt empty. Like she'd pushed all the air out herself." I leaned against the SUV, rag hanging from my hand. "I'm not here to fix it," Nathan continued. "I just wanted you to know I see what you've built. It's impressive, Luke. And I don't think you're a disgrace." I never did. There was something raw in his voice. Something that sounded like regret and relief at the same time. I didn't know what to say, so I handed him a spare rag. "Grab the other side," I said. He smiled for the first time that night, and did. We worked in silence for a long time, the hum of rain on the roof filling the spaces where words didn't need to be. When he left, he didn't ask me to call her. He didn't try to play peacemaker. He just said, "I'll come by again, if that's okay." I nodded. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe one piece of family had survived all of this. The rest of them? They kept calling. And I kept letting it ring. I thought the chapter with her was closed. For weeks after Nathan came by, the house was still. My work grew, the business felt steady, and for the first time in years, the air in my life wasn't thick with judgment. Then came the night in early fall when the past knocked one last time. It was a Friday evening. The garage lights were off. I had just locked up and was sitting on the porch steps with a mug of coffee, watching the sky bruise itself into sunset. I heard tires on gravel first. Then a car door slamming. When I looked up, she was there. No relatives. No buffer. Just her. Her hair was windblown, her eyes puffy, and she was holding an envelope like a lifeline. I didn't stand. I just watched her cross the yard, her shoes crunching softly, until she stopped at the edge of the porch. "Luke," she said, her voice already cracking. "Evening," I replied. "I need you to listen," she said, and before I could answer, she opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a photograph. It was me, maybe 12 years old, sitting on the porch of our old house, covered in paint and mud from trying to fix my first bike. She held it like proof of something. "I found this," she whispered. "And I realized I don't know this boy anymore. I don't know my own son anymore. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For every time I made you feel small. For every time I didn't tell you I was proud of you." Her breath hitched. "I was wrong that night. I didn't just say the wrong thing, I failed you. And I would give anything, to take that moment back." Her words spilled out like someone drowning. "I'm not here because of the house or the cars or what everyone's saying about you. I'm here because I miss you, Luke. I miss the boy who used to sit at my kitchen table. I know I don't deserve to ask, but please, come back. Let me try again." I sat there a long time, her voice trembling against the stillness. And I realized something. For the first time, she wasn't angry. She wasn't proud. She was scared. She finally understood what it felt like to be on the outside of someone's life. I set the mug down and stood, looking at her from the porch. "I hear you," I said quietly. "But do you hear me?" She nodded quickly, tears streaking her cheeks. "You're sorry now," I said. "But where was this when I was standing in your doorway? When I walked out into the night with nothing but a car and your words stuck in me like a knife? You told me not to come back. So I didn't. And in that silence, I built a life that doesn't need your approval anymore." I pointed to the house behind me. "This is what happens when someone finally decides they've had enough." Her mouth opened, but I didn't let her speak. "I believe you regret it." "I do. But regret doesn't erase what's been done. And it doesn't open this door." Her face crumpled, and I felt a pang in my chest, but I held my ground. "You wanted me to learn what happens when family shuts you out," I said. "And now you know. That's the lesson. There's no coming back from some things." I stepped down one stair and handed her the photograph. "Keep this," I said. "But the boy in that picture? He doesn't live here anymore." And then, gently, I guided her back down the path. She tried one last time, reaching for my arm. I shook my head and whispered, "Goodbye, Mom." When I closed the door behind her, there was no trembling in my hands this time. Only calm. Through the window, I watched her stand there for a long time, staring at the photo. Eventually, she turned, walked to her car, and drove away into the dusk. That was the last time I saw her. After that night, life became quiet again. I didn't feel triumphant. What I felt was lighter. I realized something no one had ever told me. You can love someone and still choose to walk away when that love costs you your peace. The boy I used to be spent years trying to earn her approval. The man I became learned that approval doesn't build a life. Work, self-respect, and boundaries do. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone who's where I was that night on her porch, it's this. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop knocking on a closed door. Build your own. And when it's finally solid beneath your hands, don't be afraid to close it. Because that's how I found out who I really was. Not the disgrace she said I was, but someone who learned to stand on his own, even when it meant standing alone. And I've never looked back.